Well, thanks for having me out, you guys. Am not speaking loud enough for everybody. I'm not generally a very loud person, but we got bouncy sound in this room. So I'll try to direct my face this way and not be too distracted by my slides. You will be happy to know that I finished these slides about 2 hours before I left the house this morning. And I promise you, I am a better food forest designer and consultant than I am a Google Slides maker. So please don't judge me on the state of my slides. My name's Kerry Brown. I live in West Knox County. I'm fourth generation on my family farm out there that was originally obtained by my great-grandfather, and so I am doing some of the same things he did and then a whole lot of different stuff. I'm into permaculture, regenerative agriculture, all things kind of outside of the conventional and the norm, and so I like to bring these concepts to a new audience. So food forest, to go ahead and open up the discussion, is like an orchard. So sometimes people will use those terms interchangeably, but there's a lot more going on in a food forest than there is in just an orchard. When you think of your traditional orchard, and I've visited some very beautiful ones, a lot of times there's a lot of the same trees. They're in rows. They're very neatly laid out. You're mowing the lanes in between. You're not usually adding any animals, any livestock into that mix. And instead, with a food forest, we are deliberately creating multiple layers, multiple vertical layers that I'll get into describing here shortly. But ultimately what we're trying to do is we're trying to develop an ecosystem. We're trying to develop habitat. We're trying to create food not only for ourselves or for our livestock, but for all of the creatures, from the tiniest microscopic creature up to the the hawks that pick a fight with the mockingbirds, or maybe it's vice versa much of the time. All of those creatures, we're trying to support the whole system as much as possible. And so while there's a lot of work in it up front, there's a lot of time, and I'm not going to downplay that. One thing I run across quite a bit when I go out to consult, design, and help people with their projects is they say, I want low maintenance. And that's cool, but you're not seeing low maintenance right away. It takes a few years. Then, yes, you definitely get that return on your time, and there's lower inputs over time, and you do meet that long-term abundance. But I'm not going to tell people that it's not going to be hard work, and it's going to be easy, and it's going to be simple, because it's not. And I don't like to lead people in the wrong direction there. So I'm going to have, okay, that's not too bad. I'm going to have several graphics, or at least a few graphics throughout this to help understand, so I'm not just building up a wall of text for you. But within a food forest, we've got all these different vertical layers. So we've got our canopy, which can be large trees. That can be black walnut. That can be a catalpa tree. It doesn't necessarily have to produce nuts or fruit, but you can decide if you have a large enough area that you want to plant that you need a large canopy tree. Following that, you can have your shorter trees. So you can have your dwarf or semi-dwarf fruit trees, your cherries, your peaches, all kinds of pawpaws are a really good example for that would appreciate the shade of a canopy tree above it. Then we'll have our shrub layer. If it's a shrub, it's going to do well. In my case, I've got, just offhand, several types of blueberries, and sometimes things just for the sake of the flowers and the pretty and the scent, like lilac and hardy hibiscus. And then we have our herbaceous, and that is really lots of things. All of your perennial herbs like rosemary and garlic and walking onions and so forth. And so we're just kind of working our way down. We have a root layer. We also have what people sometimes call the vertical layer or the vining layer. That can be hops, that can be passion fruit, things that you can train to a trellis, grapes, or you can train them to the trees and shrubs themselves. You have a lot of options with a system like this. It can be very densely planted and very busy, or you can kind of spread it out and it can be a little more orderly. You can kind of, depending on what your personality is and your gardening style, a food forest will let you play around with any of these concepts. So like I said, it's an intentionally designed system that produces food, medicine, fiber, habitat, among other things. It also builds your soil. This is one of the biggest things. This is the baseline of everything I do through the regenerative lenses. Am I making the soil better? That's got to be my baseline every time. And it's built largely around perennial plants. That doesn't mean you can't throw some tomatoes in there, some peppers, or let some squash ramble on the ground. You can absolutely do that. But 95% of what's going to be in there is going to be perennial, which means it's always alive and it's always coming back. And in most cases, it's propagating itself in such a way that if you want to propagate that plant further, if you want to divide that plant and create more of them, if you want to trade with your neighbors and members of your communities, you can absolutely do that. And that's kind of one of the focuses, yes, on the relationships between the plants, but food forests are a great way to, trade with your people. There's a lot of things about like how many layers. One says 7, one says 9. Somebody came up with 12. You can do as many as you want. And generally, we try to start our overstory, our biggest trees, and do them first, and then we work our way down over a few years' time. Before I forget, I do have like a nice kind of PDF write-up on the approach that I developed over the years after putting food forests in on multiple locations, and even more importantly, like rescuing several that had been started that got overgrown and that were met with a number of challenges. And I sat down and I wrote all the things I learned, all the things I observed specific to trying to pull this off in East Tennessee. And a lot of the books, and there's a lot of great books out there, they focus a lot on subtropical, whole different ball game down in, Panhandle of Florida or down in South America and all that. I'm very focused on what we need to do in our region. So that's a pretty decent example of like what a single guild could look like all your layers. So your multiple plants working together is what we call a guild. So rust-resistant apples around here do great. Hazelnut, pawpaw, American plum does wonderful. Santa Rosa plum does wonderfully. And you just kind of work your way down. I kind of think of it as like I have like a central feature. My big tree is my feature, and I kind of spread out kind of like in groupings or kind of concentric circles around that primary eye-catching plant. And then you can do several of those, and then you can kind of tie them all together. So when you want to start a food forest, you kind of have a few sites to choose from. Most of the time around here, we're trying to do this either in your just regular old lawn or yard or an old pasture. And when you do that, weed pressure is one of your biggest challenges early on. I'll get into how we address that shortly. If your property is heavily forested, you can also do like a selective harvest of certain things, of certain trees within your forest. You can remove trees that are diseased, that are not doing well, they're not growing well, and you can kind of start replacing them with some of these layers. It depends on how much sunlight you're able to get back into your canopy. That's going to depend on what you can put in there, but it is possible to convert certain kinds of forest. And then also what a lot of us would just call a brushy area, same thing. You can selectively remove certain things and replace with what you want to produce food, with what you want to eat. And so this can be your primary production system. So at this stage, as long as I've been on my homestead, my food forest and my quote-unquote kitchen garden have kind of become tied together into one system. And they're very heavy on perennials, and I just kind of have like pockets and little raised beds here and there that I do the things that I really want to have, like my tomatoes and peppers and cucumbers and that sort of thing. And so it's that site, which is roughly maybe a little over a quarter acre, I guess, that I've been working on for over 6 years at this point. It feeds me and my family. It produces food for my chickens. It produces food for my rabbits. And I also grow some supplemental sheep feed in terms of comfrey and some mulberry trees and some willow trees and things of that nature. plus all kinds of medicine, all kinds of medicinal herbs, all kinds of herbs for cooking, bug repellent. I would kind of argue the food forest, once you really get it underway, you're creating multiple products that you no longer are running down to the store to purchase. Now, we need to figure out what our preparation looks like. If you have a big open field, or you've just had your yard, your lawn sod, or whatever seed, whatever grass mix, weed mix comes up, if you just start digging into the ground and planting trees, you're going to have to obviously maintain around them until they are big enough to cast enough canopy that regular grasses and things of that nature are shaded out. So typically, I recommend a couple of different approaches. One is sheet mulching, and the simplest version of this is clean cardboard, so no tape, no staples, anything like that. Cardboard laid out, overlapped, a few layers if you can, and all the wood chips that you can possibly get your hands on. A few weeks ago, I put together a write-up on how people in rural areas can have more success getting wood chips. It's pretty easy in the suburbs. You might have heard of Chip Drop. There's a service that works with tree companies. You sign up on Chip Drop, tree company comes and brings you 10, 20, 30 yards of wood chips. It could be quite a bit. In the counties and in the rural areas, it's a lot harder. So if you want to get with me after the program, or if you want to hop on that green sheet right there, throw your email on there and write wood chips, and I will send you this write-up that I've kind of developed after ages of trying to get wood chips in a rural area. Wood chips are probably one of the most necessary forms of carbon, a necessary resource to do all kinds of perennial planting. In lieu of that, another option you have is tarping, and that's usually with something like a billboard tarp, maybe plastic that you've rescued from a hoop house, from a greenhouse, not the cheap stuff you use as barrier in your crawl space. That stuff will turn to crumbly bits in no time at all. And if you're tarping the ground for about a year, you can kind of, I'm not saying you kill everything there, but you can set back the vegetation long enough and kind of stunt it so that you can get your trees established, but you still got to follow up with getting mulch and wood chips down. So just go ahead and get it in your head. If we're going to do this, we need some forms of carbon. And then there's always, putting down ground covers like vetch and clover, buckwheat, things like that to kind of keep the soil fed until you go back and plant. And then all kinds of versions of manual clearing. I've done it. I've done bush hogging. I've done a brush saw. I've done all kinds of things to open up the land. But you have to be prepared for that response. Everybody's done it. We've all gone in, we've cleared somewhere, and 2 weeks later you walk back, especially with all the rain we've had this summer, and be like, I did nothing. I sweated for nothing. So I really try to get people to understand there is a certain amount of preparation. So like I was saying, line up your wood chip source, any other sources of carbon. So clean hay that hasn't been hit with graze on or some kind of other garbage. Straw. It's okay if the straw sprouts. It's okay if it's got wheat seeds left in it and they sprout. Just pick it up and flip it over. It'll die. It's an annual. It'll die. It's no big deal. Leaves, chopped leaves, sawdust, any of the above. If you are adjacent to any neighborhood, any area where people do this crazy thing where they rake up their leaves and they put them in bags at the curb, get them. Put them on the roof of your car. I don't care. When I lived in the city before we moved back to the family farm, people would do that. And I still do it now because we're surrounded by suburbia. So I drive around as the leaves start coming down with the trailer, and I just pick up back. I mean, I have people who call me and come pick up my leaves. They're ready. They know I'll pick them up for free because I use them in my chicken system. So be thinking, get it in your head, where can I find all the carbon? Where can I find it? I want you guys to be arm wrestling over who gets the most carbon in your group. I think it's worthy of bragging. So here's another, this is one of my favorite graphics. I did not make this. Somebody else on the internet made this. It's been wonderful. And a lot of what's actually listed on this is good for our region. So somebody did this in the South. So I don't want to get too much into a lot of specifics of all the trees and all the different shrubs and everything, but and also I am happy to email my slides. This is like not proprietary or anything. So again, send along your email. I'll give you slides. I'll give you the wood chip document. I'll give you another write-up that I've got. And if you go on my mailing list, you might get an email from me 2 times a year because it's like the worst thing. I'm like the worst marketer ever. So you're not gonna get turned into some kind of email funnel shindig. It's not gonna happen. And so this is kind of a nice. It's simple, but it's accurate. We've got our stair step heights. And bottom right where it says north. So I have played around with this on my own farm. I don't think it matters that much your orientation, as long as you're on a full sun site, so 8 hours minimum. The way my food forest is set up, because it's on a hill, the upper portion of it, which would be the westernmost portion of it, is completely shaded by a building that it's next to depending on the time of year, 5, 6, 7 p.m. And it's fine, because as you guys have probably noticed, the way our late day sun can be here, it seems like that sun's almost hotter than any other part of the day. Like everything's just absolutely getting baked. So a lot of things seem to benefit from catching that late day shade. I know my blueberries do. Like they get a lot of early to midday shade, and then the blueberries are shaded late in the day by the taller trees that are actually uphill and west of their position. So it's completely possible to play around with this, especially if you're only playing around with your smaller things and you're not really, working with an 80-foot black walnut or whatever. Also, that bottom right, we're talking about nitrogen fixers. I don't want to overlook that. If you have soil that's in rough shape, if it's thin, if it just seems like it's nutrient deficient, if you do a soil test and nothing really remarkable comes back, you can plant a lot of nitrogen fixing shrubs and trees to start. Cut them down after a few years, plant next to them. Those roots have been feeding that soil that entire time. Plant the tree you need next to it, and then you can it's called a coppice system, and so the nitrogen fixer that you cut down will re-sprout, and it's still doing its job, but maybe a couple times a year you just come through and you just buzz that thing at the ground, and it's doing its job, but it's not taking up that same footprint, if that makes sense. So I am a fan of chestnut. The American chestnut, unfortunately, is almost impossible to find due to blight, but there is a Chinese-American hybrid that does really well. I've got a chestnut tree that I grew from a chestnut seed that is now, I put that seed in a pot 3 years ago, and that tree is now about 17 feet tall. I mean, it's huge, and it's got chestnuts on it right now. Pecans are another one. Hickory nuts are great. And I know a lot of people, they talk about, don't plant anything around black walnut. The roots exude juglone, things can't grow. Tell that to all the trees and all the shrubs and all the flowers that are growing underneath the black walnuts that are all over my farm. I don't think that's actually all that accurate, at least not in our particular soil structure. So, and black walnuts are wonderful nut trees. I'm a fan of them. They have a ton of anti-parasitic properties. They're very useful. And one of the most easily, I'm not saying easily obtainable because they are difficult to crack, but one of the highest fat contents of nuts that a tree can provide. So apples, pears, persimmons, especially the Asian persimmon varieties. We do have our American persimmon here, but they tend to have to be very, very tall, and you're usually picking up fruit off the ground, and they're very sour and stringent, but the Asian persimmons grow they're hardly the same thing. I mean, they're huge. They're the size of an apple. Some of them are crisper like an apple. Some are very soft and sweet. There's, probably at least half a dozen good cultivars you can get here now, and they all do really well.
Hey, Carrie.
Yeah.
Can I make the assumption that everything that you're saying that's not native is at least not invasive?
Yeah, I'm not going to tell you to plant anything that if it jumps ship, it's going to cause you any issues. Yeah, I mean, technically, like, white mulberry is invasive, but it's already so endemic in our area. Like, don't plant kudzu, guys. We all passed a lot of kudzu on the way here, didn't we? Yeah, don't do that. But yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I do like to focus on a lot of native stuff. I think it's very important. I'm really big on trying to preserve and certainly restore an ecosystem that's taken a lot of damage. But I'm also realistic, and I would rather see more beneficial trees as long as they're not detrimental to the overall ecology. Blueberry does great. Elderberry will turn into a tremendous hedge. Ask me how I found that out. Should have spaced those more than 4 feet apart. Aronia, what some people call choke cherry or choke berry, that's more of kind of like to feed the birds and things. But it's a great little shrub to kind of occupy another edge or another hedgerow. I'm on the hunt for a goumyberry. I would love to find some goumyberry. There is a really good supplier that I've worked with multiple times. If you guys do want to write this down, it's Food Forest Nursery. It's an online nursery. Yeah.
One Green World. I got some from them years
One
ago.
Green World?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
They did fantastic in Jersey.
Yeah.
Which is about the same climate.
Yeah, this is one of those things that's really taken off. There's a lot of really good suppliers now. It's really easy to find this stuff. You don't have to go spend some ungodly amount of money at fastgrowingtrees.com for a stick that's like this. And as part of, I do have that on that list that I can send you guys, is a lot of the suppliers I've worked with. And then your herb layer, some people call it the flower layer or the perennial layer. Plant comfrey everywhere. Comfrey everywhere. You need it for everything. Bee balm, yarrow, walking onions, all of these things are building biomass. They're supporting your pollinators. They're cycling that nutrient through. And a lot of people, and I'll do this too, will cross over between the herb layer and the ground cover. Obviously some herbs, like, your rosemary, you can get this tall eventually. So a ground cover is more specifically something fairly walkable. So things that I have found that have come up in my food forest that I didn't put there, they just showed up as the soil became healthier, all of which is medicinal and edible, is like sheep sorrel, which is real like lemony, tart, fresh green you can eat. Lamb's quarters, which is kind of similar to spinach, and then plantain, which has all kinds of skin healing properties. For my ground cover, I do use a lot of clover. White Dutch does really well. Crimson clover as well. Creeping thyme. These things are keeping your soil covered, and they're helping outcompete the weeds. So your ground cover will eventually be pretty important, because some people will just kind of keep wood chips as their ground cover. They'll just kind of come through and they'll just kind of add wood chips a few times a year. In my case, I've let the wood chips break down. There's not too many places where you really see wood chips anymore. And most, like I said, at this point, it's comfrey, clovers, sheep sorrel, and a lot of like wild strawberry. Not like plants that I've purchased, but wild strawberry has kind of filled in throughout. Muscadine grapes are one of the best grapes to do around here. They grow wild. The Scuppernong is one of the cultivars that's most popular here. Passion flower is another one that you can let you can let it ramble, or you can train it up trees. Passion flower only grows to about 6 or 8 feet, so it doesn't go absolutely crazy. But they multiply off of their roots and their crowns. So if you have a real thick patch of passion flower, don't feel bad about kind of digging them up and thinning them out, because they can, I'm not saying they can choke out an area, but they can get pretty dense and a little bit tangled. And then garlics, Jerusalem artichoke, which is an edible tuber that you harvest in the wintertime. I've done turmeric before, and then dug it out and put it in a pot and overwintered it, because it doesn't, same with ginger. Those two won't overwinter here all that well, but you can, dig some, take them inside. And then, I don't know if I put it on here or not, but you can do your fungal layer too. So once you have really good shade, you can inoculate some mushroom logs or do like a coffee ground style grow bed or grow medium for various kinds of mushrooms. I mostly do shiitake, mushroom, and chicken of the woods. They're fairly like beginner friendly. They don't need a bunch of tending, because my mushroom, I'll plug them and I'll do the thing with the mushrooms, and I just walk away from them and don't mess with them again. And so I need things that kind of need to look after themselves. And like I said earlier, if you've got sunny edges, throw in some raised beds, or if your wood chips are deep enough, dig back down a little bit and throw in some plants or some seeds for the annuals that you'd like to have. So one of the big things about this whole system is that everything is carrying multiple functions. Obviously, kind of our number one is like we're trying to supplement our caloric intake. We're also trying to produce food as close to our front door as possible, and do it in such a way that it's clean and it's nourishing for us. So we've always got that nitrogen fixation, like I mentioned, the pollinator support. When I go and I look at all the different mints or another ground cover that's very prevalent in mine, when I see all the different kinds of bees and butterflies that are on the mints, like when I walk through my food forest now, there's just something going on everywhere. There's some kind of, something flying around, something pollinating, something going through its life cycle, something turning from a caterpillar into a butterfly. It's a really fascinating place to hang out in. We're accumulating nutrients, so at no point do I quote unquote clean up my food forest. If I prune, most things I just leave laying on the ground, as long as it's not something like real woody that's kind of going to be aggravating in the way and I'm going to trip over it. We kind of call that chop and drop. So when I prune, or if I do get in there and I kind of pull up some weeds, I don't haul anything out. I just lay everything on the ground. And over time, it just integrates into the soil, and we've got a nice, it's what we call the closed loop cycle. And then mulch and pest management. My food forest supports so many different birds at this point. I don't have too many problem bugs because the birds are hanging out, chowing down on bugs. This is where we're kind of talking about having that whole system working for you. So you hear the word guild thrown around a lot. Like I mentioned earlier, that is several things working together. So a nitrogen fixer is helping to feed the soil, helping to prep the soil for your more kind of permanent tree or shrub. Maybe you've planted comfrey, maybe like around the trunk of a tree, and that is shading the soil. You're coming in and you're kind of chopping that comfrey leaf down, and you're harvesting some for your salve, but you're also leaving a lot on the ground. You're feeding the soil again. Daffodils are one that I like to put at edges of food forest. The reason you find daffodils on old farms all the time and old homesteads is it really is a pretty good deer deterrent. They are poisonous to deer, and they bloom when your brand new fruit trees are also blooming and also very palatable to deer. So daffodils are kind of the old timers trick for helping to keep the deer at bay. Yarrow is another host plant. It has a lot of medicinal use. All of these things are working together and serving a purpose. I'm not sure, that didn't show up too bad. One of the many examples that are out there, if you get on your preferred search engine, food forest diagram, you're going to find hundreds of these. And so just start looking at those, and I've got a few books I'll talk to you guys about too. But it'll start giving you more visual of what this can kind of look like. Horseradish is another really good root. I love horseradish. I've got it in several locations. Now, before we start just throwing plants in the ground, we do want to have an idea of how much sun it receives. How does it get water? We are going to need some supplemental water. You have the option, of course, of especially if you're on any kind of hillside contour line, are to dig small swales. I'll get into that in a minute. But it's a passive water harvesting system that sinks more water into your soil. What is the nature of your soil? What kind of amendment do we want to plan on? Sometimes wind gets overlooked, but a young little sapling tree is pretty vulnerable, so you might want to think about if it needs to be staked and supported. How do you want to get into it? Access to it, access in and out of it. I like to have multiple ways in and out. And do you need to make your paths and such wide enough? Like, do you want to be able to get in there with, your mower and your little mower trailer? Or are you just going to walk in with a wheelbarrow? Kind of have that stuff kind of planned out. And anything existing that you might want to retain, or if you feel like it needs to come out of there. Our rule with water is we want to slow it down, we want to spread it over a wider area, and we want to sink it in the ground. And a swale, which I should have, that one's pretty fuzzy. So a swale is a basin on the contour of the land, which means it's level throughout. You're not trying to kick water too fast one direction or the other. You're trying to bring that water down into your basin, let the water chill, settle in, and then just immediately on that downhill side, you've got a berm. So when you excavate out, that material you pulled out, that becomes your berm. You plant that berm. That berm is where you can plant your trees. Or really anything you want. Anything that you're not going to dig back up. We want to leave that berm in place. Catch that water, we slow that water down. So in my food forest and my kitchen garden that is now kind of like one thing, I have micro swales. So my swale is about 2 feet wide. It's only a few inches deep. It kind of acts as a channel that I can actually walk in. And so because it's on a hillside, as it catches that runoff, with the exception of putting in like a brand new tree, I don't really have to water anything, even when we're pretty dry. That swale does so much work to hold more water in the soil instead of it just continuing on down the slope. And there are a lot of rules about doing swales and whether or not it makes sense, so that's something that you want to certainly figure out. But in most cases, on a gentle slope, go ahead and dig one. It will not hurt. That's kind of an example of what a planted swale can look like. So you do want to plant something on that berm because those roots are going to anchor that berm in place. Otherwise, eventually over the years, it's kind of going to erode off and flatten off, and it just won't be quite as effective. And what will happen, I don't think I have a graphic for that, but if you think about underground, over time, that basin, as it lets water infiltrate, it's called a plume. You'll have a plume of water under the soil. Not necessarily like a pocket of water. I mean, it kind of shows it that way in the graphic. I don't think that's actually how it works, especially not here in Tennessee with all of our limestone and sinkholes and everything. But you definitely you'll have a deeper root system, and you'll have just a more even moisture content being retained in the soil. How are we doing on time, guys? Can somebody let me know?
It's 7:35.
Cool. Okay. So yeah, like I said, start small. Start with one fruit tree with really good treatment to the soil, so really good wood chips, and just kind of stair step it out as you go. When you're planting, generally we want to do bare root trees fall through the winter time, and if you can find your potted trees on sale late summer through the early fall. I just try not to put them in when we're super hot. I mean, potted trees you can technically put in any time of year, but it's really better to do them when we're heading into the cooler weather. Trees would prefer to spend their wintertime setting their roots instead of trying to push out leaf and push out bloom and everything if you plant them, as soon as we warm up in the springtime. Tree planting and shrub planting is really a wintertime, fall and wintertime activity in my opinion. Some of the mistakes that I've made and that I've helped other people correct, too much stuff in too tight of a space. That was my thing, or spread it over too large of an area that became difficult to maintain, or just wrong spacing in general. So I have things that are too close together, things that I'm gonna have to end up changing, or I'm just gonna ignore it and see what survives because I have enough land that I can kind of continue on down the hill and stretch it out a little bit more. Not mulching, and the biggest thing is the mindset. People, they see, they get on somebody's YouTube channel and they see this stuff that just it's lush and it's beautiful. Well, these people are showing stuff that's been in the ground for 10 or 15 years. It's a very long process, and so they have that in mind, and so they're kind of bummed out on those first couple of years are pretty slow. Things really pick up on their third year. So be patient with the process and enjoy the process. Like I said, when I started mine, I noticed in year 3 was when the soil started to shift into really supporting the trees and everything was looking really good growth, habitat showing up, critters showing up and that sort of thing. So it goes faster than you would think. So I've got a couple of videos here. I took video this morning of 2 sites on my property that I'm going to try to, I think I filmed it a little fast, so I'm going to try to slow it down. I'm going to pause it. I'm going to kind of I'm going to narrate to you guys now. All right, so we are at the kind of upper southwestern edge of my food forest. And what you're seeing right here, this is Big Mama elderberry hedge. Like I said, I started those as 4 little cuttings 5 years ago now. And I got a little volunteer sycamore. We've got a big sycamore that's like behind me from where I'm standing here. And so the sycamore throws seed balls everywhere. So I get volunteer sycamores all over the place. Some of them I retain. This one I'm going to end up moving because it's in the middle of the patch of some various rhizomes that I'll be digging out. So it's going to get disturbed anyhow. We got some Johnson grass that I decided not to fight any longer this summer. I mean, you guys know it's August. We're all just trying not to die out there. I'm the same way. It's not pretty. It's messy. It's been hot. It's been raining a lot. And so we kind of go down the hill here. I've got that right there is a pink lady apple tree that I rescued out of a dumpster. It's doing pretty good. We already passed it, but there's a fig right off the edge. Figs do great here. We've got some hazelnuts. There at the bottom of the hill are a pair of kefir pears. I've got a couple of bush cherries right there.
Karen, did you swale all of those?
Yeah, so there's a swale at the top of the hill there, right above where the elderberry are. I've got some squashes just rambling, some weird random. I think that's millet, not corn. You can hear the bugs. You guys know how hot it is. That's an elderberry that just volunteered. I'm going to dig that one out in the wintertime and put it elsewhere because it's kind of eating up valuable real estate. That's actually supposed to be like an access point, and it just took it.
Concrete near your elderberry?
Oh, yeah, all around.
We had an issue with that this year where it was killing our elderberry plant.
Really?
Like it was taking all the nutrients and all the water.
But
Maybe early on it could be a problem.
I
Yeah.
didn't swale the trees out in the meadow between us and Carroll, and then we swale a whole set of trees up the hill between us and Hartley. Those trees looked the same when they came.
Yeah.
Those trees, the same size, 2-year-old trees. The ones in the meadow are just still struggling 3 years later. And I think, it's because they don't have good drainage. The comfrey, the elderberry doesn't have good drainage, and the comfrey is choking it out. We're stealing all of its water. And it's
You might try chopping your comfrey back more if you
Oh,
haven't
I
been.
did.
Okay.
I murdered the comfrey.
Yeah.
And
It was everywhere else.
saved the elderberry, but I had to really get in there. And
Yeah.
chop it and stay close to the elderberry trees. The elderberry's gonna come back fine, but
Yeah.
I think for me, it was a good experiment showing me that swales are really important.
Yeah, they make a world of difference. Even just little ones, like I said, just ones I literally I dug those with a shovel in 90 minutes. Probably one that's about 40 feet long. More pear tree there. A lot of the tall stuff you're seeing is apple mint, so I do get in there a couple of times in the summer with my weed eater and just kind of knock it down. It does get pretty tall. Let's see. These are my blueberries in between the pears. There's a blueberry right there. They did great. Those are 4 years old now. And they're actually starting to layer themselves, so I'll have some that I can dig and transplant. That multi-branch there, I've got 3 red mulberry that produce a good bit of fruit. Mulberries are great. You can't get them in the store. Apparently I panned way too fast right there. Another one of my apple trees. So on the apples. We do have a lot of cedars around, so I get a lot of cedar blight. Trying to see if I can get them to adapt.
What do you mean by that? How would you get them to adapt?
See if they keep living and don't die. Basically. Yeah. I'm wondering, as the soil continues to improve, because I've added more nitrogen fixers down at ground level, if that soil structure will support a tree and make it less susceptible to.
What if you were using cedar wood chips?
I don't think it matters that much. The blight is it's on. Have you ever seen a gall? You know what a gall looks like on a cedar? That's where it comes from. So it's not really going to be in the chips. It's going to be, it has to be able to like disperse that fungus, you know, from the gall. That's a magnolia that was already there. It was planted there when I started developing the site. That's comfrey on the ground there. Have a lot of just field wildflowers come up, a lot of ironweed and goldenrod, stuff like that. That's another hazelnut, and we're gonna jump to another random location. Thanks for that, computer. And then let me show you one more. This is actually, pause this for a second. So I've got two separate systems. So I just showed you guys what I actually call my food forest. That's got the higher canopy. But if you have a smaller yard, or if you just don't want to go, you know, big trees, this is my upper garden, which is kind of a pollinator garden, but at this point it's got enough fruit trees that kind of qualifies as a smaller food forest. And so we've got hardy hibiscus, all kinds of, let's see, that is sedum, which is edible, some borage in there, lots of evening primrose that just volunteers. That's another nice sycamore that I'm going to let be the successor to the big mama sycamore that sits between my house and the shop. There are some mulch paths throughout here. Of course, it's that time of year, so everything's really dense. And then here in the, a lot of coneflower, black and brown-eyed Susan, lots of comfrey, some lilacs that may eventually flower. I don't think they like the heat. And then, as we kind of make a turn here in a second, I've got two 4x4 raised beds in the middle, and I plant those out with various, you know, there's tomatoes, and I've got a whole bunch of sweet potato in there, some cucumbers and whatnot. This is also the garden that when I get something off of a job, like I dig a lot of stuff out that people don't want anymore that I feel needs a home. So this is like the home for all the things that I rescue. And I have enough room. Like I can probably add another 500 square feet to this garden without really impacting the way I use my front yard otherwise. Got some elderberry in there too that I didn't want in there, so I kind of pulling the elderberry out. I've got another large mulberry that I want to be my main canopy tree for that western edge. Another fig in there, right there is another little fig that came from just a little root cutting and is already a couple of years old. And that was a rescued mulberry. I was mowing a yard, and then this lady was like, "Will you dig that tree out?" And I brought it home, and now it's huge. More hardy hibiscus, and then this other side of this trellis, I'm not sure if I pan over that way or not, but it's loaded with passion fruit, which is one of my favorites. It's gonna be so good. It's actually Tennessee's state wildflower, and it's great. And then, like I said, a habitat. So that was a birdhouse I found elsewhere on the barn or elsewhere on the farm that had fallen off, and so I picked it up, cleaned it out, and put it there on the on that post. So again, you can support your habitat. Little Ren was checking it out this morning, so she's probably going to move in there. There's more than dozens of things in this garden at this point. I could stand here for 2 hours listing off everything that's in here. It's a lot. Random. I throw a lot of random seeds out too, so I get some marigolds and you name it, it's in there. Put a nice little sitting bench in the middle of all of it. It's a nice place to hang out, and we'll just see how it goes. And that's garden. This garden is in year 5 now. Started planting that garden right after we got the cabin put in. So like I said, I've got, resource-wise, I'm happy to email you anything that you would like to know. I do have some stuff on my YouTube channel at Strong Roots Resources. Making video is not my day job, so what's on there is what it is. I try to make it useful, but it's definitely not high production value. And these books over here, Feel free to take a picture of these. Don't run off with them though, or I'll find you. There's a website. It's called Plants for a Future, pfaf.org, and it is this database where any plant, pretty much anywhere in the world, but it's very relevant to North America and Europe, gives you all these specs of a plant. And so they started publishing these books a few years ago to support the cost of running the website. And so like if I find a new plant, because I'm really big into wild food foraging too, so if I find something for the first time, I'll look it up in my field guide, and then I'll look at Plants for a Future and find out, more about medicinal use, food use, that sort of thing, livestock. And so when they started publishing those books, those are some of my primary design manuals. So when somebody was like, I want to grow the food forest, I want you to design this food forest, I'll sit and I'll flip through those for, for ideas and to double check sunlight needs, soil needs, water needs, all that kind of stuff. Plus they're just beautifully illustrated and just a lot of fun to flip through. And I have a pretty ridiculous library. I have a book problem, so, and I admit it, and so I had to get those. And then for a little bit more of an overview of permaculture in an inexpensive book, look up Introduction to Permaculture by Bill Mollison. It's kind of like Cliff's Notes to his big old manual, and it's pretty relevant to all things. Like if you really want to have like an introduction to the whole perennial philosophy of these guilds and these ecological systems, that's a good kind of framework and baseline for all of that. So let me answer y'all's questions. Oh, we're awake now.
What's your advice on figs around here?
Brown turkey and Chicago hardy have survived multiple 0 degrees without dying all the way down to the ground. So sometimes other specimens they'll die down to the ground, but they come right back, but you might not get, obviously you won't get as much fruit because everything above ground got walloped. So those are the two that I have. There's also, you can look them up by, there's early season figs. So there's some figs right now that they tend to be smaller, but they're ripening right now. They started ripening 2 weeks ago. And then there's ones that ripen until we get that first frost. So you've got early season and late season. The early seasons tend to do a little bit better around here. So it's a smaller fig, but they're more productive. Figs like to be pruned really well. They like to have a lot of sunlight coming in. That's one of the things I've noticed. I've pruned a bunch that had gotten so dense, they throw up so many suckers through the center. They were so dark in the center that the sunlight couldn't penetrate that leaf canopy. So I got in on one that was an otherwise healthy fig, but really just didn't fruit much, and cut out a whole bunch of, a lot of stuff in the center was just dead. It wasn't even, really doing much of anything. And now that fig is fruiting like crazy at one of my customer sites that I maintain. Yeah. Yes, sir.
On the wood chips, is there any wood that you wouldn't want to chip and use as much?
Not really. No. What I would want to watch out for is, where they chip and stuff that was covered in kudzu, because even a little bit of kudzu root could root. That would be bad. And if they can, if they're able to tell, like I don't worry too much about most diseases, because usually that time a tree is coming down because of a disease, it's not going to transfer. The problem's not going to transfer through wood chips. So if you get stuff that's real heavy on pine, they're just going to break down faster. That soft wood's just going to break down real fast. But most everything you're going to get around here is going to be a hardwood mix.
You don't think any of it will be sprayed?
I've never had an issue with it. I mean, most people don't spray a full-blown tree, I think it's probably one of the cleanest, that and leaves are probably one of the cleanest sources of carbon you could get. Yes, ma'am?
Do you use companion planting when you do your food forest?
Yeah, I mean, this is basically like companion planting on steroids. Yep. Yeah, and you can like if you do that like for your garden, for your veggie garden or your flower garden, it translates right over to a food forest. Yep.
When you plant like a squash under your tree, and you've got this stuff that's been there, or you said a cucumber, right?
Mhm.
Cucumbers in intermingled. Do you could just go out and you have a tray of starters and go out and sort of pick where they're gonna go? Do they go in the same place every year? Do like a system?
No, I don't have a system. It's chaos. It's sheer chaos by the time I get to that point. Yeah. Yeah, like on my own farm. Yeah, obviously, like if I'm doing it as an install, it's a little bit more deliberate. But yeah, on my own land. Because the thing is because that forest changes each year, right? So my son's shifting, so I'll get in there and be like, oh yeah, I'll put them in last time because they did great, and then I'll be like, they're not going to do as well there. So I'm not like I get more sun. Like my sun's mostly at the edges now, so I'm putting more stuff at the outer edges. Yep. Yeah.
Do you design systems to have animal inputs to run animals through the food forest?
Yeah, I do, and I'm actually, so I feel like this year, like the food forest you guys just saw, this year, at this current state, I wouldn't do this in the spring with my sheep, but as my sheep come back around to that side of the farm, I'm going to put them in the food forest. I'm going to see what happens. But I've got area, like I have this one patch where I just never really got ahead of the fescue with the cardboard and everything, so I've got like this thick pile of fescue. I don't know, it's not a huge spot, but it's, about the size of like 2 vehicles, and I want them to hit that and like knock that back so in the fall I can come through and chip it some more. And there's a bunch of there's just a bunch of stuff in there that I know they'll eat, and my trees are in a state that they're not going to hurt them. Even my blueberries, I don't think they're going to hurt them, and everything's pretty much fruited. The only thing I've really got now that's left is the figs are putting a few on. But most things that I wouldn't want them to eat are, they've already set their fruit. So, chickens are one. Ducks are actually one of the best. Chickens so kind of depends on the state of things. More mature, yes, chickens do great. I would run chicken when I was at the city. I would run my chickens through a food forest. At that point, it was about 10 years old. It was a little postage stamp in the front yard, but I would fence it and put the chickens in it, about once a month. Ducks do really well because they don't dig, so they'll do your slug patrol. They'll do all that bug control for you, and I don't know that I would leave them in there indefinitely. It would kind of be like a bring them in, pull them back out kind of thing. Yeah. Now my buddy Billy Bond in North Carolina, he has his food forest kind of set up more like row style, and he has lanes, and he'll run fencing through the lanes and graze his sheep through the lane so that he doesn't have to do any manual maintenance there. And he'll do that if the trees are still young, so they won't hurt the trees this time of year, but if there's a young tree in the spring and they've been on hay and they want something fresh, they'll go right after that and they'll strip that bark right off. So it kind of depends on the state of the tree and what time of year it is. Yes, sir.
Yeah, just a comment on wood chips. They're a great source of carbon. We've got a lot of trees around here.
Mm-hmm.
But from a nutrient standpoint, they're the primary nutrient in wood chips is potassium.
Yeah.
Now you need potassium, but you get too much potassium when you're loading in tons and tons of wood chips year after year. Your soil's not going to be balanced in nutrients.
Yeah, so I guess
And unless you're doing a soil test and adding in the other things,
yeah.
to balance that out, your soil isn't going to be as healthy as it should be.
So I guess in the system that I was describing, I generally don't keep adding wood chips, except maybe for a path. It kind of depends on the nature of the path. It's more of like I kind of front load it to get the soil into a better condition, especially in an old pasture is the example that I use the most because most of these old pastures, it's just straight up, it's like goldenrod, broom sedge, and crownsbeer are the only things growing in it. So I load it up with those wood chips early and then basically let the carbon that the trees drop serve as a portion of the nutrient cycling. So I don't keep adding because you will eventually see some weird stuff.
If you're starting from a pasture that's got broom sedge in it, the soil sucks.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Way out of balance.
Yeah.
And it's not going to, adding just potassium to really balance it. It's just not.
It's something worth playing around with. I've done it a bunch of different ways, so,
Similar, I actually had a good experience with the witches, but I had a front yard that was so dense and had probably that shale that was so hard, and I probably put at least this much wood chips. But then when I went to plant my onions and such, I did put some bagged soil down and
Yeah.
And so it's coming through, so I put strawberries in, and they did exactly what I wanted to do, then they choked out everything.
The strawberries choked out
Yes,
everything? Yeah.
The older beauties.
Yeah.
They just shot out runners like crazy, so is that where I go and like cut out the runners to keep them, cause I didn't even get the strawberries, I just got plants.
You just got plants. Yeah.
I mean, I don't have Bermuda anymore, but I have.
I'm glad you hear you had success getting rid of Bermuda, because the only way I've really been able to get that to chill out is to plant enough to, one, crowd it, and two, like create enough shade. So
Strawberry is so thick, I mean, it's,
yeah.
it's like.
I mean, strawberries are the cultivars that are out there now. I mean, they kind of anticipate that you're going to pull off the baby plants off the parent plants and plant them elsewhere. So cut your runners and transplant. Some people also go back to keep them from crowding too much. They'll actually mulch over top of the strawberries with some straw, or I've even used like I had excess pine needles from a job one time, and I mulched over top of my strawberries, and they just kind of thinned themselves out. The stronger plants came to the top, the older, weaker plants kind of died back. So it kind of depends on like how hands-on do you want to get. Yeah, strawberries, that root structure they have is, it's like a web. It's pretty dense.
With strawberries, you gotta thin them out.
I figured they
And you
were.
shouldn't keep them in there for more than a couple of years
They
anyway.
were so, there's
And then it started, it's another bit.
yeah, they're aggressive this year.
Amber, did you plant it in that particular,
It was the second year, so, the first year the wood chips was that big, and then, yeah, after that year, it broke down quite a bit, and it was really nice soil, and then it was fine.
Cool. What else can I answer for you guys?
Pomegranates. What kind of pomegranates can you?
I can't get them to be happy here. Yeah. I think we just get a little too cold. Yeah. I've tried some cultivars. I can't remember the name right off the top of my head. I've tried some cultivars that are supposed to be okay for our zone, but they just, they leaf and everything, but they don't fruit. Pomegranates. Yeah. Yeah. Now that we didn't always hit these, single digit 0 degree temps, but now we are. So, I think it's just too hard on them.
What about gooseberries?
Yeah, I've got a bunch. Some people call them Josta berries. Some people call them currants. There's, of course, all kinds of crosses and hybrids and stuff. One site that I work on a couple times a month has, like 12-foot tall gooseberries. They do great. And you can actually get, those are very, very thorny, so they're not a ton of fun to pick, but there's thornless cultivars out there now too. Yeah. Well, guys, thanks for coming out. Thanks for braving what looked like absolute buckets of rain coming down a little while ago.